We're going to talk more about this now with our international affairs editor, Angela Diffley, who joins me on the set. Angela, 1 year after October 7th, the way in which Israel responded under the leadership of Benjamin Netanyahu is hugely controversial, outside Israel, of course, but also to an extent within the country itself. Talk to us a bit more about what's guided his thinking or what's governed his decisions over this past year.
Yeah, I think this was very much led by Benjamin Netanyahu. It is important to remember that before October the 7th, Netanyahu's reputation was Mr. Security. He was the person who many Israelis felt, whatever else his other faults, Israel was secure under Netanyahu. So that was a huge security failure under his watch. He hasn't ever apologized for it. He hasn't ever said there will be a commission of inquiry. There might be further down the line, but that has not even yet been promised. And so he has a lot to make up for. It is true also that some people blame him because he nurtured or fostered the divide which already existed. There was a civil war between the leaders, or Hamas leaders in Gaza and the Fatah leaders on the West Bank. So the Palestinians were divided. The two leaderships hate each other. And he was content to foster that as a way of keeping Palestinians disunited. And some people say that towards the end, because his coalition government leans heavily on a far-right ultra-religious element on which some of the politicians are settlers, a lot of Israeli army priorities were going to the West Bank to protect settlers setting up illegal occupations on the West Bank. And so the border between Gaza was not properly protected, people say. So there is a lot of baggage before this decision. Beyond that, Netanyahu has always been a hawk. He believes strongly that Israel will always be under attack, that it must have a credible deterrent, and that its deterrent had been undermined by this failure on October the 7th. And for him, it is all about instilling fear in a very hostile neighborhood. It is awkward because the issue of the hostages divides Israelis somewhat because many of the hostages were people at the festival, people from kibbutzim who tended to be peace-loving left-wing people, not Netanyahu supporters. And although everyone in Israel would like to see them returned safely, it does complicate the military operations. And often Netanyahu is said not to prioritize the hostages, not to care enough about them. His ultimate care is Iran. He has always worried about Iran, and he is pleased that there is some international support for his position on Iran, and that he wants Iran, which creates havoc in that area, but pays no price because it uses proxies. He wants attention turned to Iran.
Angela, another really interesting battleground, if you like, of this war has been social media. We've seen supporters of Israel and their opponents competing to try and control the narrative ever since October 7th, to an extent perhaps not seen in other wars before. Tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, and I think, overwhelmingly, young people appear to be anti-Israel. And much of this, it might be down to, this is the fact, this is the first time a major Israeli-Palestinian war has happened since TikTok. And there are a lot of short 15-second videos on TikTok, and it has garnered a lot of sympathy for the Palestinian cause and a lot of antagonism towards Israel. And whereas before the creation of the State of Israel was seen as a situation with a complex background, it was a battle between two national movements. It is increasingly seen, and particularly by young people, as a straightforward struggle against Israeli colonialism. And that is something quite different that has changed, I think, and amongst young people around the world. We've seen demonstrations on campuses in Western capitals. A lot of young people are very motivated. And Israel has really not managed to put out a counter-narrative that's taking hold. Israel tries to point out that the high civilian death toll, how do you fight an enemy which embeds itself in the civilian population? And there's ample evidence that it does. The fact as well that wars involving Israel seem to be the subject of scrutiny, which is not the case in any other war. Very few wars are even noticed, cared about. Everything involving Israel is watched, scrutinized, criticized. They feel that is unfair and that they're not being given a fair whack. And they also say that if you look at the unfortunate, tragic, high toll among civilian deaths, they say it actually compares relatively to many other wars. It is a sad fact of war that civilians die, but and also they say that Hamas don't divide civilians from fighters. But that narrative is absolutely not taking hold, and particularly amongst young people around the world. It is very interesting to see.
All right, Angela, thank you for that.